A long time ago, in a faraway land, lived a beautiful young girl named Anaya, who dreamed that one day she would meet a dashing young stranger who would fall hopelessly in love with her and take her away to live in her very own vine-covered cottage. She would have a garden full of flowers and a house full of babies, and life would be perfect. She would grow vegetables and herbs and wave to her neighbours each morning as the women came out to see their husbands off to work and lean across the hedges for nice little morning chats in the sunshine. She would invite them all to afternoon tea, and they would sit with their dainty little teacups and beautiful lacy frocks and talk about the children and their husbands and what was for supper. That was the dream. That is, until Anaya's 20th birthday, when her father and stepmother decided that she was now too old for marriage and that she was becoming a constant drain on their meagre income. The father and stepmother stayed up late one night discussing how Anaya should pay her own way and how they might make this happen. It was decided that they would send out an advertisement for Anaya to work as a scullery maid, and that they would collect half of her income every week to repay them for her upbringing. The couple told the news to Anaya the very next morning. Anaya knew that it would be impossible to find a husband once she was working all day long cleaning, scrubbing and doing laundry. She was very sad. No one would want to marry a lowly scullery maid. She decided right there and then to run away. She thought for a very long time that night about how she could run away without being caught. If only she were a boy, it would be so much easier. No one would question a boy on the road. He could go wherever he wished, do whatever he wanted. Anaya began to think of a plan. That night she found her stepmother's mending basket. In the clothes that needed repairing, she found an old shirt and a pair of trousers. She would have to use some old ribbon to make the clothes fit around her waist and a cap to hide her long dark hair. But she felt hope and excitement for the first time in years. Within an hour she was dressed in the old torn clothing. She bound her hair, tied it in a scarf, and put an old cap over her head. Heart-pounding, she tiptoed out of the house. Standing in the dark, she took one last look at the house she had lived in all her life and sighed. It hadn't really felt like a home since her mother died. Looking at it now, she saw it for what it was, a cage. And like a bird, she was free of that cage now. She could fly wherever the wind took her. She'd felt hopeless before, but now there really was hope. With a quick step, she left the farm behind. Before long, she came upon an abandoned hut on the edge of her father's property. Anaya had been in the hut before and knew there were candles for light and a blanket on an old chair. Soon she was fast asleep. She was awakened early the next morning when some cows wandered close to the hut. She peeked out and, not seeing anyone around, closed the door and was soon on her way. Anaya walked until the late afternoon. She was feeling very hungry and tired, but she realized that until she had travelled for a couple of days, she would not feel completely safe. The sun was beginning to set when Anaya saw a cottage ahead. A lamp was burning brightly at the window, and she could hear a woman softly singing a lullaby. Feeling very tired, thirsty and hungry, Anaya timidly knocked at the door. "Who is it?" came the cheerful reply. "Hello? I've been travelling all day without food and water and hoped you might have a chair I could sit in for a while. Come in, there's always a chair in front of the fire for a weary traveller." An old woman threw the door open wide, and Anaya saw the roaring fire, the table set for supper, and in the corner a nice cosy bed was made up. "Well, sit down now, my lad, and tell me of your adventures, but first let me bring you a cool cup of water. There you go." Anaya thanked her for the water and gazed longingly at the supper table. Seeing this, the old woman chuckled and offered to set an extra plate for the grateful youth. Once Anaya's stomach was comfortably filled, she leaned back with a satisfied smile and thanked the old woman yet again. "Well now, I can't be turning you out with night coming on. You'll stay here by the fire," she continued, and I can see you're ready to fall fast asleep. So we'll wait until breakfast to hear the tales of your travels, eh?" But Anaya was nearly asleep on her feet and barely remembered her head falling onto the soft pillow. When she woke the next morning, it was to the smell of eggs and sausage frying in the skillet. "Good morning to you, miss." "Good morning," replied Anaya, and then suddenly both of her hands flew to her cap, which was gone. She stared open-mouthed at the old woman, wondering what to do next. "Now, don't you be fretting, child. I don't know how you come to be here, but I suspect you've run away from a bad state of affairs at home. Just know that you're welcome to stay as long as you need to rest up. I'm sure you'll tell me anything I need to know in your own time." And she looked expectantly at Anaya. "Yes, ma'am," replied the young girl meekly. "I am running away. It's just that, well, I know I'm past the marrying age, but my father and stepmother were going to force me into service as a scullery maid. I want more choices for my life. Am I not old enough to decide for myself?" She ended her explanation with a mutinous pout. The old woman grinned. "Why, you surely are. Let's eat our breakfast and then we'll talk some more." Anaya helped clean up the dishes and the kitchen after they'd eaten. She told the rest of her story and how she'd been so lonely for years and was waiting for marriage to escape her father's home. The young girl talked and talked and talked. She poured out her heart, and in so doing, found someone who listened patiently and attentively. When she finally finished, she knew that the old woman would not try to make her return to live under her father's roof. The old woman wiped her hands on her apron and stood up. "I'm going to make us a midday meal if you'd like to help, and then I have a proposition for you if you'll consider it." She then shared her own story with Anaya, how she'd run away herself as a young girl, how she'd found this cottage and the woman who'd lived here and been taken in. And after that, how she'd been taught about gathering helpful herbs and plants to help the local village people in times of sickness, and how to be a midwife and a nurse for when the doctor couldn't come. Then she looked at Anaya and concluded, "I'm getting older and it's harder to take care of my duties. I'm offering you the same chance I had. It's a good life. You may not have the dashing young man and house full of your own babes, but you will be free to live life on your own terms." Anaya considered it carefully. She realized that this indeed was what she'd been looking for when she ran away. Without knowing it at the time, it was what she would have chosen. And then a beautiful smile lit her face. "But I'll still have the vine-covered cottage." The moral of this story is that, firstly, you may not know what life holds for you. It may be so much more than your current dream. And secondly, you have the power to break out of your own cage. And lastly, happiness comes from helping others who may not be in as good a place as you are right now.